The next issue I'd like to cover is having to do with repeatability, so that we're not trying to compare a violin that we tried a week ago and a violin we're trying today, trying to remember what the instrument sounded like in this room compared to what the other instrument sounded like in that room. Something that most people don't realize is that the room plays a huge role in what you perceive as the sound of that instrument. So by changing the room, you're effectively changing the instrument. You want to put yourself into a situation where you've got the same room that you're trying your instruments in every time. When you're in the shop trying instruments, find instruments that maybe a couple that they'll find out the shop guidelines, but they'll usually let you leave with a couple, maybe a few instruments on trial. Find instruments that are roughly the right size, that feel somewhat comfortable, that have a sound that you think might be a definite maybe. But get those instruments to a place where you know the sound, you're comfortable with the sound. It doesn't have to be Symphony Hall, but it does need a place you have easy access to, and you can try all your violins in the same situation. What people will find is that shops will typically have a room for trial that is very loud. You can have a smaller room that, if you don't have any carpet or things like that on the walls, the instrument's going to seem really loud. And you can go take the same instrument into a room that doesn't have, that has soft surfaces, drapery, carpeting, pictures on the wall, bookshelves, anything that's going to break up the sound that's trying to bounce around from the instrument. And you can dramatically change how powerful the instrument seems. So try and find a room. I would recommend a room that's medium size and fairly acoustically dead. Shops will typically go for a medium-sized room that's acoustically very live. It'll make the instrument seem more lively, it'll make the instrument seem more powerful, clearer sounding. That's best case scenario. But worst case scenario is a really dead room where all you hear are the acoustical attributes of that instrument. And sometimes it's pretty shocking when you take away the sound of the room and you're hearing just the instrument, because bottom line is it's going to be just the instrument that you take from room to room. Okay, so you arrive at a shop, and occasionally shops can be more or less inviting. There are lots of reasons for this. And if you want to simplify things between your relationship between you as a musician looking for an instrument and the shop owner wanting to provide the best possible instrument for you or sell you an instrument or whatever they're trying to do, you want to keep it as simple as possible on both sides of the equation. To do that, it's very, very helpful if before you go into the shop, you decide what your price range is going to be. If it's going to be $5,000 to $10,000, it's not very helpful if you ask the shop owner to show you $30,000 instruments, and they're going to find out later that your budget was only $10,000, so they're going to not be very pleased that they put a bunch of time into showing you instruments that are not possible acquisitions for you. So try and be reasonable with what your price range is and let the shop know that. I highly recommend that, the one exception to this rule, I highly recommend that whenever possible, if the shop has some really great sounding older instruments, and if they'll let you try those instruments, be very clear, say, we don't have anywhere near the amount of money to buy that $300,000 violin or whatever it is, but this is your great opportunity to compare to something that is possibly a really great sound as opposed to comparing to your previous instrument, which you may have enjoyed, but you ideally are not looking for an incremental step up from wherever you were. You want to have something that's going to take you closer and closer and closer to the acoustical voice that, for our purposes, we're going to assume that the acoustical voice provided by Stradivarius and Guarneri da Gesù is going to be the most sought after. So having an instrument that sounds like a hot dog isn't going to help you choose an instrument that's going to sound like an orange. So if the shop will let you try a really great older instrument, it's a great opportunity to get what a really great instrument can feel like, how it vibrates, what it's like on your shoulder, the response, what it sounds like under the ear, things like that. Then you'll have something that you can shop around thinking, that's my goal, that's my ideal, as opposed to, I had an instrument that I was maybe happy with, maybe it wasn't very happy with it, and I'll get something a little bit better. It's a lot better perspective to look at things than a little bit better than this, as opposed to reaching for something really great. The room that you're trying the instrument in is, we've talked about it, it's very important. Find a room that's not too live, ideally not super, super dead, but more toward the dead end of things. And a room you've got easy access to. So you can bring any and all instruments that you're considering to that room to try. The room plays such a significant role that it's even important that you position yourself in the same place in the room each time. Another variable that confounds things, and it's really, really unnecessary, is people change bows. And they'll say, oh, well, this instrument sounds so much better with this bow. And they'll switch, and they're changing bows, and they're switching instruments. You need to lock in on one bow. Granted, anything that has to do with violins, you will always find exceptions. But if you go into the process and say, I'm going to have my tester bow, and I'll use that through the process. I've got my tester room, I'll use that through the process. It's really going to simplify things. It's very hard to keep track of several hundred variables. One or two, people can handle. I certainly can.